My insane mother went off the deep end months ago and attacked my sister because she wasn't young and pretty anymore. Early this year I posted about how my delusional and obese mother was forcing my little sister to wear clothes that were in our mother's sizes. The first post made on Ida was removed, but I'd gotten enough positive feedback from it back then that I realized I was not in the wrong. Then I reposted the Ida post as a personal post on my page. Back then I thought the situation had been resolved. But it later spiraled badly. I never thought I'd be posting on this particular subreddit. But my sister recently reminded me I'd made this account a while back, and I managed to log back in. To start off with, my sister finished high school, and has gone on to college. But our mother didn't take my sister's growing up well. You see, at first Mom was just acting sad and playing the victim after I'd forced her to see that she and my sister were not the same clothing sizes. Some said I went about it the wrong way by being so blunt by forcing her to see she couldn't fit into a coat my sister can. However, I really don't think there would have been another way to get through to her without involving the authorities. Police, CPS, etc. After the incident, my 45-year-old mom was still dressing in clothes like a teenager at home and binge-eating fast food. And my sister caught her in her room trying to try on her clothes several times. Yes, our mother did destroy a few more pieces of my sister's clothing trying to put them on. But we confronted her each time. Rather than make her previous excuse of stating her belief that my sister and her were the same size, she would just lock herself in her room howling and crying to the point neighbors even once called police to do a wellness check. Of course, when police arrived, I saw a very different side of my mother. She'd put on a nightgown, and did not look like someone who'd just been crying her eyes out. Not only was she pretending to act her age, she lied through her teeth and said that my sister had been the one making those noises because she'd been grounded for tearing up her mother's new clothes. I called this out as an outright lie. And she yelled at me to shut up. The police didn't know who to believe. But nobody was hurt, no threats were being made, and my mother wouldn't stop with the guilting waterworks that her children were so awful to her. So the police just issued a verbal warning and left. As soon as they were gone, my mother told me to get out. And that she didn't want me as a son anymore because I made her feel horrible about herself. I realized then that the loving mother she once was who raised us was completely gone. Eaten by the narcissist before us then. Just a few years prior she was a kind and loving mother. Especially to my sister. But that obviously changed. There was a verbal altercation in which I pointed out to my mom's face how much of a narcissist she was being. Regardless of the size of her clothing, she didn't need to be trying on my sister's clothes. They were not hers. She wasn't even buying my sister clothes anymore. And if she wanted to disown me so badly, then fine. But I would also be disowning her. She threatened to hurt me again, in which point I told her to bring it on. She may be twice my weight, but she is not strong. And if she were to hurt my sister, I'd made damn sure she regretted it. My mother went back to howling and crying in her room after I said that. So I just left, but not before telling my sister to call me if she tries anything else. Shit hit the fan not long after my sister's 18th birthday in May. She went out with friends because our mother had hardly spoken to her in some time. She'd effectively disowned me and gone no contact. And she was just biding her time to kick my sister out too. When my sister came home from her birthday party, she found her stuff in boxes and bags left outside of the apartment she shared with our mother. And there was a note taped to the door telling my sister to leave, and never come back. This would normally be the point where someone might say they were heartbroken. But the truth is that we were prepared for this. We knew Mom wanted my sister out because she refused to take Mom's shit anymore. So she'd been secretly taking her stuff over to her friend's house little by little. This includes her personal documents for her identity. So all of her important stuff was out of there. And our mom just didn't seem to notice. My sister called me, and I came over with my car to start packing up her remaining stuff to take to her friend's house. Since my sister was 18, she could go where she wanted. And her friend's family took her in. And my sister lived happily there while she finished high school, and had a great summer before she and her friend both left for college. They'd applied to the same place, and were accepted. They're some distance away now. But they are happy and living as roommates. But as so often is the case, there was trouble in paradise. I think our mother was hoping to pull some sort of emotional manipulation by kicking my sister out. But it backfired badly since none of us even batted an eyelash about it. So Mom started messaging my sister that she'd cut off her phone plan if she didn't speak to her. My sister responded by getting her own phone with money she earned working part-time, and sent the old phone back to our mother in the mail with a letter telling her off for what she tried to do. Mom didn't take that well. But she no longer had a way of contacting my sister without trying to see her in person. So she came stomping over to my apartment to yell at me and say it was all my fault. Then she demanded my sister's new phone number. I told her to buzz off, because she was no longer my mother. She'd previously made it clear I was no longer her son. And if she didn't leave me alone, I'd be calling police. And then in a complete repeat of what happened on the day I'd forced her to see my sister was not the same size as her, she ran away howling and crying like an animal. But by then I was pretty sure it was all an act. The next thing my mother did was show up at my sister's friend's house. And then started demanding she move back in with her and contribute to rent, because she was paying for a 2-bedroom on her own, and no got child support since my sister turned 18. Like me, my sister told her to buzz off. That's when Mom attacked her. She grabbed my sister and started wailing on her while screaming that it was unfair that my sister got to be young, thin and pretty. And that she wasted her youth being a mother. That's about as far as she got before my sister's friend's father took her down. He ripped her off my sister and threw her to the ground. The man is ex-Navy and built like a steamboat. He pinned my mother down and forced her into submission before calling the cops. He referred to her as a screaming whale for the sounds she was making. My sister was taken to the hospital after police arrived and took statements. The Ring doorbell cam on the house had caught the entire fight. So the dad wasn't charged for taking down my mother as he'd reacted in defense of my sister. My sister was lucky and only have some bruises, a black eye, and a bump on the head. Our mother was a heavy woman, but she couldn't fight her way out of a paper bag. Mom ended up in jail, and she used her one phone call to try and guilt me into coming over and paying to have her released. I just said I'm sorry. I don't have a mother. You must have the wrong number. Before ending the call. She didn't ever call me again. My mother bailed herself out. But still had to go to court for attacking my sister. She ended up getting off with just a fine. She was also kicked out of her apartment by the landlord for several reasons. One of them being she tried to solicit herself to him, or so he says. But she denied it ever happened. So she was kicked out after a month or so. But she left a surprise for him. She'd spray painted graffiti on the walls and smeared the bathroom with her own feces. The landlord called me over, and I saw the chaos she'd left. Thankfully it wasn't as bad as I thought it'd be. Just some choice words for the landlord painted on the walls, and the bathroom mostly just had the mirror smeared. So the landlord didn't bother to call police. A cleaning crew had the apartment cleaned and repainted quickly enough. But from there my mother spiraled worse. I heard she tried to pick up younger guys several times. And a friend tipped me off to where she was doing it. I found her in a bar across town. She was wearing pink hot pants a few sizes too small and tried to pick up a guy half her age. And she started calling him a vain little prick for not being interested in her. She was trying to claim to be 29 years old. But no one believed her. Then she saw me. She looked furious the second she realized I was there and started her howling back up as she stomped out. I ended up having to explain to a few people there that she was my mother, and she's nuts. The bar manager told me he'd put her on the ban list because she was trouble every time she came in. The spiral went deeper. I really don't know what my mother was doing for a living, or even where she was living, as she'd gotten fired from her job and had no apartment. By this point my sister was happily off to college. And people stopped seeing my mother around town. That is until she was found dead in a motel room. She'd overdosed from drugs and died in late October. I was next of kin, so I was notified of some details. She'd heavily overdosed and also had a lot of alcohol and junk food in the motel room that she was binging on. So police were pretty sure she intended to die this way. When I saw her after she'd passed, she'd lost a fair bit of weight, and looked like she'd aged 10 years in just a few months. It turned out she was suffering from an untreated STD, and had likely been abusing substances for years. She'd pretty much destroyed her body from the inside out. In her final couple of years of life, she was the worst mother she'd ever been. Maybe from a mental condition, or from her drug use. We don't know. We'll never know now. The funeral for my mother was little more than a very small gathering with an urn. And we spread the ashes at sea. There were no tears shed by either me or my sister, or even many words spoken. We ended up going out for ice cream and just having a talk before she had to drive back to where she currently lives because she had class in the morning. I think it can be best described that we weren't happy Mom had passed, but not sad about it either. If anything, I'm not really sure how to mentally process it other than the fact that it's just over and to move on. Currently we have plans to meet at my sister's friend's parents' house for Christmas. My sister and I have no close relatives nearby. And since we were raised so far away from them, they're fairly indifferent to us. Always have been. My sister and I don't even have the same father. We don't even know who our fathers were. Mom never told us. She'd just say we didn't need to know because they didn't want to know us. So there's no point in seeking out a parent that didn't want you. But we're working hard to move forward in life. I've recently begun dating a nice girl I met while having a morning coffee. And we've been together for about 3 weeks now. Without my mom in my life, drama has been minimalized. And I'm rather thankful of that. Hopefully I'll never have to make a post on this site again.